What's up, Banter fam? Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Miles, and in today's episode, we will be discussing my top altcoins for October. I'm going to go through some of the altcoins which I think could perform well against the market and that are really performing well based on their respective narratives. I also want to talk about what is happening in the global market with some of the key upcoming dates for October. Basically, this video becomes your ultimate October preparation list. So you have all the key dates right in front of you, all the altcoins that have key dates in October, so you guys can be on top of the market heading into October. September, some people are calling it Rectember. Although it kind of started a little bit shaky, it actually ended up pretty even for the Bitcoin price by the end of the month. So September, it ended up kind of being a bit of a flat month. We saw some altcoins bleed against Bitcoin in September, but a lot of people are now turning their eyes to October, hoping that it will be a much better month. Let's look into whether that could or couldn't be the case. Firstly, a very interesting trend to note is that the Bitcoin price has actually been performing very well in terms of the Bitcoin GBP pair. I talked about this yesterday on the show. It's quite interesting now. We're kind of seeing a mini decoupling of sorts with Bitcoin against some of these alternate currencies. Obviously, with the strength of the US dollar, we've seen a lot of other currencies actually lose strength against the US dollar as we've kind of seen the global situation worsen as a whole. So we've seen, obviously, the GBP collapse against the US, the euro collapse, but obviously the Bank of England stepped in with their bond buyback program, a form of QE, which did kind of put a halt to the DXY running, and that resulted in a little bit of relief for Bitcoin and the stock market as well. So it's kind of an interesting trend, and we're going to have to keep our eyes on it because I do see Bitcoin as a narrative going forward, definitely kind of shifting from a store of value, but also to kind of being this safe haven asset that people in the midst of currency depreciation can actually flock to. Because I mean, you've got a few choices if you hold if you hold a depreciating currency, where to actually place your bets. You can go into USD. That trade has kind of already run a little bit. You can go into gold, or you can go into Bitcoin. And Bitcoin, with its unique advantages, being a true form of hard money, has a very unique advantage when it comes to operating as kind of like this safe haven asset. So although this trend may take a while to play out, I think what this week has done as a whole is really emphasize the global need for Bitcoin as a whole in our economy. And to be honest, long term, this week's made me more bullish than Bitcoin than ever, because I just see the need now so clearly for a currency like Bitcoin that is true hard money, that, you know, I think a lot of currencies could benefit from, especially in the future, if this kind of general trend continues of currencies losing strength versus USD and currency depreciation, especially in these smaller upcoming developing nations. Then I definitely see a place for Bitcoin. So although I won't jump to conclusions and say this is the decoupling that's happening right now, it is very interesting to note what is taking place. And I just sense a little bit of a narrative shift when it comes to Bitcoin. In terms of Bitcoin's price performance against the NASDAQ, we've actually seen Bitcoin slightly outperform stocks. So once again, a mini decoupling of sorts, not a major one, because Bitcoin from its peak to current levels is down 18%. Bitcoin is the orange line. The NASDAQ, which is the blue line, from its peak is currently down 21%. So Bitcoin is performing slightly better than the NASDAQ because the major sell-off in risk assets like Bitcoin was in June and July. So ever since July, we've seen Bitcoin actually outperformed the stock market just slightly because it kind of front ran equities a little bit. And this is a trend that's been happening basically all year. Bitcoin front running major stock market events. And then when the events actually come, it's kind of ended up stagnating like we've seen over the last month. The August to September price performance has been pretty stagnant in terms of returns. And we can see that it has outperformed the NASDAQ over the last month, just marginally. So interesting that there is a slight decoupling here, but I would really just put it down to Bitcoin moving a little bit quicker and a little more preemptively than the stock market. So let's kind of turn our attention to October, look at the Bitcoin performance over previous months of October. And if we move to the monthly chart here on CoinGlass, we can see that October historically for Bitcoin and crypto as a whole is quite a bullish month. So September, we obviously know that's quite a red month. The last 6 or 5 consecutive Septembers have printed red. In fact, it's now 6 that this month printed minus 2.7% red. But Octobers are actually quite strong performers. And we've only seen 2 out of the last 10 years actually be red for Bitcoin in October. So I mean, obviously past performance isn't indicative of future returns. The macro environment is completely different now, and there are some key things that are happening on a macroeconomic scale which weren't happening back then. For example, we are in a QT environment right now. Many of these other dates we were in a QE environment, and Q4 performance as a whole in the stock market is generally quite positive. One of the reasons why Bitcoin did run during those months. Although I would say this gives me a little more confidence, at least just maybe psychologically, having a nice October print last year and the year before, that potentially investors could be a little more optimistic heading into October. And we know how driven the market is by consumer sentiment. So having previously strong Octobers does give me a tiny bit of confidence, although I'm not being too crazy, because we know that there are some major events coming up. The first of those major events is the 2022 United States midterm elections. This is happening on November 8th. Multiple theories flying around as to how the midterm elections will affect crypto. For quite a while, I've kind of had the opinion that the Democrats don't really want to tank the market before midterm elections. Obviously, the Fed is kind of the main driver behind how the market is reacting at the moment with these rate hikes. However, I would say tanking the market before November wouldn't be the most palatable thing from a Democratic perspective. So when we do look forward towards the midterms, potentially maybe in tandem with historically strong Bitcoin months, having a midterm election wouldn't be the worst thing for crypto, because potentially they won't want to tank the markets before midterms. But then there is also the other side of the equation, which is they kind of want to get these rate hikes done as quickly and aggressively as possible in order to quell inflation, so that unemployment and jobs data doesn't get too crazy, because kind of like the lower class, the ones that most of the people that are actually voting, those people are being affected the most by inflation. It's not actually the rich people that own stocks are being affected by inflation. So that's kind of like the contrary argument to the midterm elections. However, I still maintain the theory that the likelihood, or at least the percentage risk, remains to the upside in October. And that's just my opinion. I could be wrong. We have El Capo calling for new lows, but I just think that the market's settling a little bit. And unless there's a massive black swan event coming in October, then the midterm elections could be something to steady the ship. But at the same time, the US CPI and the FOMC, upcoming FOMC in November, they are the big events which will kind of dictate the future of risk assets, as long as nothing breaks on the currency side of things. So we do have to look at the CPI, which is currently being forecasted at 8.1. The previous print was 8.5, and actual core CPI was 8.3. So looking into next month, the CPI data is released on October 13th. So in 2 weeks, we know there's a lot of volatility trading around CPI. So we do have to keep our eye on this, because if CPI comes in higher, then obviously the likelihood of that 75 BPS or even like a doomsday 100 BPS rate hike would increase. However, if it comes in lower, then there is a chance that the Fed doesn't hike rates as much as we previously thought. Interestingly, after the Bank of England issued their bond buyback plan, essentially a form of QE, what's happened is the percentage probability of a 75 basis point rate hike by the Fed in the next FOMC has declined by 15%. So that is, I guess, positive from a crypto perspective. And this is really what has caused the little bounce over the last few days, is this probability decreasing slightly. However, the CPI data will be the major driver of this number here, because as I said, if we get a higher CPI, then the Fed will have to hike rates. But if we get a lower CPI, then potentially we get a lower rate hike next month. So although the data comes out on October 13th, the FOMC is not until November 1st. So October is actually a break for FOMC, which, to be honest, could actually be a good thing, because it kind of gives us a little bit of breathing room. It's felt very claustrophobic lately with event after event after event, but having a tiny bit of breathing room in October isn't necessarily a bad thing. And then we have earnings season. And if we look down to the earnings season dates, we know that over Q4, from the October 15th to November 30th, a lot of major companies will start announcing their Q4 results. These periods are obviously quite volatile, because if companies miss expectations, then stocks can take a hit. Bitcoin, being an extension of the stock market, can also take a hit in tandem with that. So the third quarter, October 15th, is when these results start to be announced. So a few things to keep your eye on. It's the CPI, it's the FOMC response, which will happen in November, and then also the start of earnings in 2 weeks. So we do have a couple weeks until these next events, a couple weeks of a little bit of breathing room. Let's just hope nothing in the macro economy breaks in the meantime, because all this currency war stuff going on has put a little bit of a damper on markets, although the obviously Bank of England intervention ended up being a positive, at least in the short term, for crypto and risk assets. As I said, interestingly, Bitcoin outperforming NASDAQ over that period. So if October does end up being a bullish month, we do have to prepare for that scenario. And when that scenario comes, if it comes, we need to have the best possible altcoins on our watch list to benefit. So we need to be in the projects that can perform the best in this period of time, obviously taking heavy profits heading into the rest of Q4. But if we do get a stretch of bullish momentum here, we want to be in the projects with relative strength. And I have a couple updates for you across some major altcoins, which I think are exhibiting relative strength. And these are projects I've been taking a little bit as a nibble, at in anticipation of October, just in case we do get a bullish market and I can really capitalize against the grain here on some of these altcoins. So before we get into that, remember, we do have the $1,000 trading bonus for anyone that signs up for a new ByBit account. You actually can have an existing ByBit account, but if you've never traded futures, then you are eligible for the airdrop. So if you've never traded futures or you don't have a ByBit account with Banter, I highly recommend signing up because you can get airdropped up to $1,000 in Ethereum for a free leverage trade. So you're basically trading for free if you deposit. You literally, all you need to do is deposit, claim the airdrop using the second link, and then trade. Like, you don't even need to trade with your money. So if money's sitting in a bank account and you don't have a Banter Bybit account, well, then I guess it is free money for you because all you really need to do is deposit and then claim your airdrop. So if you haven't done that, link in the description to do that. I mean, who doesn't like free money at the end of the day? All right, let's get onto some of these big announcements. The first major big announcement we saw is a couple of things. We saw, firstly, Chainlink partnering with Swift. So we know Swift is the global payments processor. Chainlink partnering with Swift is absolutely massive. We've seen that's kind of been the narrative driving XRP, driving Quant, driving some of these ICO 2020-0022 coins. That's kind of a narrative that's being pushed at the moment. Chainlink joins that group now, being the main oracle for the price data for Swift going forward. That was a big announcement. And in tandem with that announcement, we also saw Chainlink announce their Build Incentives program, which is a new Economics 2.0 program aimed to accelerate the growth of Web3 projects. So essentially, projects commit to provide network fees and other incentives to Chainlink service providers. And in exchange, they get enhanced support from the Chainlink ecosystem. So this is just another cool accelerator program to incentivize some development using Chainlink. I've said it for quite a while. Chainlink is one of those projects which has the most real life use case in terms of crypto, because every single project needs Oracle data. Every single dApp is going to need Oracle data. And if you go with the best and most robust ecosystem with the most incentives like Chainlink, then you are one step ahead of the curve. So I have Chainlink in my long-term portfolio. You guys know I've been sharing my long-term portfolio once like every, let's say, week or so. I shared 3 projects. If you didn't check out yesterday's video from that portfolio, I can tell you right now, Chainlink is in my top 8 holdings in that new next cycle portfolio that we are actually building, just because it has such a clear use case and it's not going anywhere. Many projects can go to zero. Chainlink would absolutely shock me if it did, because it just has such a clear use case. I guess for a while, the knock has been the tokenomics, but with some of the new updates we saw through the staking that was implemented 3 months ago, the revamped tokenomics, and then these accelerated programs, Swift partnership, things are just starting to tick up a little bit for Chainlink. So this is definitely one, if the market turns bullish, I think can perform very, very well, because it has that super strong narrative now behind it. The next thing that we have to talk about is Circle. Circle USD, the issuer of USDC, announced that they are intending to deploy USDC on Arbitrum, Cosmos, Nia, Optimism, and DOT. So this is massive news for Circle. But this is even bigger news for the protocols that are getting USDC, especially for a chain like Atom, which previously has kind of had a little bit of a void that has been created by the collapse of UST. They don't really have a primary stablecoin now. USDC can become that stablecoin for these ecosystems, as I said, Cosmos being one of them. So USDC launching in these ecosystems is massive. It makes it easier for devs to build new apps, users to spend, users to on and off ramp currency from their exchanges to their MetaMask wallet and so forth. So I do think Circle deploying is big news for DeFi as a whole. And it's very positive for some of these individual chains. Layer 0, which is a very exciting upcoming omni-chain interoperability project. This is on my watch list because they don't have a token yet, but if they ever have a token and if they ever launch a token, which I think they will, Layer 0 is on almost the top of my list in terms of a project that I actually want to get my hands on. We just don't know when it's coming, but definitely make sure you're following Layer Zero on Twitter, because that is an amazing project. Right now, the closest thing we have to Layer Zero is probably a Stargate. That's another great project that is on my buy list. I keep spoiling the damn list, but whatever. I'm giving you guys the alpha in these shows. But yeah, Stargate's on the list, but Layer Zero is in that upcoming category. They also partnered with Circle, and then as I said, Atom, probably the biggest beneficiary for this reason. Atom stakers actually get a percentage of fees from USDC transactions. Zaki, one of the employees at Cosmos, did confirm this, and that is big news. For a couple of reasons. Firstly, because essentially what will happen is institutions could be more willing to invest in Cosmos, and transaction volume is directly captured by the new and revamped Cosmos hub for USDC transactions. So Emperor Osmo says the market's not grasping how big this is. Atom holders will receive USDC from transaction fees generated. Few understand the value accrual interchain security will generate. This obviously comes off the back of the major Cosmos hub update. That is a very big update for Cosmos. This is what is driving the current relative strength of Cosmos right now. And if you're interested in hearing more about that, 2 days ago on the channel, I did a full deep dive into Cosmos's update. So I highly recommend, if you haven't watched that video, watch that video because it's essentially giving you an overview of these changes. But having the USD compatibility now and fee generation from USD is very good news for Cosmos. And that is only now capable due to the new Cosmos hub update. So that is big news for Cosmos as a whole. And then the next project, I think, is starting to show some relative strength. So all these projects are the ones that I've got my eye on for October because of the strong stories they have behind them. Gains Network's another one of them. So obviously we've seen GMX and the perp dex narrative really come to fruition. Perp dexes have exploded basically, but specifically GMX has exploded with its daily trade volume coming in at over fee generation coming in at over $1 million per day, many days of the last month. I do think though GNS is a likely rotation here, and I've been saying it for a couple of weeks. I think GNS is probably the better risk reward play than GMX right now, just given GMX has risen so much in price, and I think Gains does have that upside. It had its first $200 million day in March. So GNS has had massive growth in not only trading volume, but also off the back of that revenue generated. We can see on June analytics, I've got all the dashboard here for GNS. The new daily user count has been steadily increasing. They used to only get like 150, 70 users per day. Now they're consistently getting 200, 250 users per day. The G-Trade volume in DAI is now $100 million daily. Once again, if we go back to even June, which was a high volume period of trading, they were only doing 10 to 30 million a day. So they've almost 8x'd their trade volume on G-Trade in the last 3 months, which is absolutely crazy. And I would say the price isn't fully reflecting that quite yet. So if we look at GNS's price, although it has been a strong performer, I wouldn't say it has been as strong as the rest of the market. It's had a little uptick. Obviously from its June lows, it's up quite a lot, but let's just compare this to GMX. It really hasn't exploded. So definitely one I've got my eye on at a $55 million market cap. Another one that I do want to accumulate, potentially could be a strong performer in October off the back of some of this insane exchange growth. But also check out the June Analytics tab for Gains Network if you want to check out these stats yourself. Always do your own research. Super important in crypto. And I want to give you the keys to researching in these videos to help you guys out on your journey. So GNS is another one of them. And then the biggest narrative in October, in my opinion, is the World Cup, because the World Cup is at the end of November, and leading into the World Cup, you have multiple projects which are either sponsored by the World or sponsoring the World Cup, or have NFT ecosystems which are partnered with FIFA or athletes in the World Cup. So you've got a few projects that I think are really prominent during this time. Remember, the Qatar World Cup is going to be viewed by 5 billion people. That's almost the entire world viewing the World Cup. And that is the biggest viewership of any sporting event of all time. So you can't deny just how big this event is. And that is why I've been secretly preparing myself in the background for this. Now, you guys do know, if you watched my World Cup video 2 weeks ago, I did say Chiliz is one that I was accumulating. If you did start accumulating that, well done, because you'd already be up roughly 30% on your trade. If you did get the bottom, I didn't expect everyone to get the bottom, but if you did get the bottom, then you'd probably be up 34% on that Chiliz trade, and that's with no leverage. So with leverage, once again, leverage is up to your discretion. I personally don't use leverage. I'd rather trade, or I use a little bit of leverage, maybe like 3x, but I mainly did spot trades with this, but larger spot positions. For Chiliz, you would be up 34%. 3x leverage, you'd be up 100%, depending on how much you used. But Chiliz is definitely a project that is showing some strength into the World Cup. If you don't know what it does, it is the main, the token is the main token of the Socios exchange, which is partnered with Lionel Messi, Manchester United, PSG, a lot of major sporting clubs, and it essentially issues fan tokens. So tokens that you can use to get exclusive perks and benefits from supporting your football club. So Chiliz is showing a lot of strength off the back of the World Cup hype. It has cooled down a little bit. So for October, since the World Cup is still almost 2 months away, because starts on November 20th, there is still a little bit of room to run here. I do expect this to be a buy the rumor, sell the news event, but I am holding on to my position for now. Obviously a tiny bit of profit taking, but generally holding, and I might even accumulate a bit more around these levels just in case, because I still think there is a little bit of room to run. If you do get a pre-midterm pump in tandem with a bit of World Cup hype, then clearly Chiliz can continue to outperform the market, which is one of the reasons why that is on my watch list for October. Cointelegraph did an article about this too. It's funny, they did this article like 2 weeks after I talked about it on the show, and now they're starting to push the whole World Cup theory a little bit. Because Algorand, another one of the ones they mentioned, is the major L1 sponsor of the World Cup. So they will have a lot of eyes on them during the World Cup. Once again, buy the rumor, sell the news event, probably an event that occurs, but Algorand definitely one of those projects that is going to benefit from this narrative. And we can see, interestingly, if we look at Algorand's TVL, although most projects are down like 70% from their peak TVL, Algo's continued to grow quite steadily. Having AlgoFi, Folks Finance, and Lofty as the three major drivers of this, they're almost at their all-time highs in terms of TVL. So from a fundamental perspective, transaction volume, total value locked, and the total value locked to market cap ratio, Algorand is starting to look better and better by the day. Although it's not an L1 I would love to hold long-term, because I just, there's other L1s I prefer. I just prefer like Solana, prefer Nia, just prefer some other ecosystems to Algo. But I do think short term, over the next few months, and even specifically over the next month, Algorand probably does outperform those L1s just off the back of the current interest from the World Cup, from its NFT exchange, which is printing some crazy volume. We could see its NFT monthly sales on Algo is now up to 8.5 million algos from, it's been steadily increasing every month. Just a few months ago, it was 2.2 million. It's almost 3x in volume to 8.5 million. So its NFT sales data is very promising in USD. It's now doing $2.7 million in NFT monthly sales. Daily sales peaked at the start of September when a couple major collections launched, but September is still much, much, much stronger than it was in August. And we can also see monthly sales by marketplaces also significantly increasing. So Algorand's strength is being driven by its NFT ecosystem. Quite interesting that Algo is cementing itself as an NFT chain. A couple of other bits on Chiliz that I just skimmed over that I do think is important to touch on is the Chiliz bridge that was just announced. So that is chain swap, allowing you to swap in and out of Chiliz and Chiliz related assets. And then also Chiliz is now available on blockchain.com, the wallet and the exchange. So they are actively pioneering new partnerships. And I think this is quite a cool feature. This Chiliz bridge basically allows you to move Chiliz between blockchains, and it allows your assets to be available for the Scoville and Gurley testnet. So that was a good announcement as well that we got yesterday. So a lot happening with Chiliz, a lot happening with Algo ahead of the World Cup. GNS is the other one that I think is exhibiting some amazing strength and could perform relative to the rest of the market off the back of its revenue generation. And then you also have Link and Atom, which have been two very stagnant performers for a long time. But recently, with the latest announcements with Atom's 2.0 upgrade, have seen a lot of renewed interest in those ecosystems. So some exciting stuff for October. Those are the altcoins on my watch list. Let me know what's on your watch list for October. I'm interested to see in what you may be looking at accumulating for this month. It all is going to rely on the macro environment. So this isn't a case of me just aping into altcoins and going very stupid. I am keeping a close eye on the macro at the moment. But if we do get this rally, and that will be signaled by a Bitcoin breakout, and we do get an opportunity to get into alts, these are the alts I'm getting into. So I'm not saying ape into them. I'm saying if we get a breakout, these are the alts that could exhibit relative strength based on fundamentals. I'm sure Sheldon and Kyle are going to chart some of these altcoins for you to give you those entries, but I wanted to give you the ultimate fundamentals today. They won't like to hear this, but I believe that the market is driven by fundamentals and not technical analysis. I think if anyone thinks otherwise, you're kidding yourselves. I'm sorry, traders out there. That's my opinion, so I'll continue to deliver the fundamental alpha for you guys in the future. If you want more alpha, I'm going to be heading over to Instagram right now and doing my daily discussion. You guys know how I like to come onto Instagram and answer any questions you guys have after the shows. So there is a link in the description. My Instagram link should be there. Yeah, it's right here. There's an Instagram link in the description if you want to click on that and join my live stream over on Insta. And we can have a little bit of a chat on a fun Friday in Australia, although it might be a Thursday night if you are in the US. So thank you guys for hanging out. It's been a great week of content. If you haven't watched those other shows, double speed them, get through them, get the quick info, because I reckon there's some good stuff in those shows. So thanks everyone. I'm on Instagram now. I will see you in the next show next week. Peace out.